U.S. history students everywhere, hello and welcome to yet another episode of APUSH Today. My name is Peter Paine and I am a San Marino High School AP U.S. history teacher with over 30 years of teaching experience. I am also a blogger, keynote speaker, podcast host, and frequent teacher conference presenter. In today's video, we will be exploring APUSH Topic 3.4, the philosophical foundations of the American Revolution. But what exactly will you need to know about this topic, you're probably asking? Well, the answer to that question can be found in what's called the APUSH Topic 3.4 Learning Objective. In other words, by the end of this video, and especially for the May APUSH exam, you'll need to be able to explain how and why colonial attitudes about government and the individual changed in the years leading up to the American Revolution. Now, before actually trying to address this learning objective, I want to take a few seconds to describe for you the colonial attitudes about government before 1765. This, the first year that most historians generally note as the start of the American Revolution. In those years, when the colonists would think about government, they would think mostly only in terms of being proud and loyal subjects of the British government. In other words, prior to 1776, the colonists generally didn't think in terms of independence. But then in those years, why should they? For remember, before 1765, Britain had adopted a policy of salutary neglect, this meaning that they were essentially keeping their hands off the colonies. And so therefore, given this much freedom, this much room to roam, the colonists had no real reason to demand their independence. So how and why did that all change after 1765? Well, the answer to this question can be found in key concepts 3.21a and 3.21b. But with so much text to read here, my guess is that you can't find the answer to my question right off. And if that's true, then go ahead and pause this video for a minute or two, and while paused, read over both key concepts word for word to find the answer to my question. Okay, so now that you're unpaused, were you able to do it? Could you find the answer to my question? What you should have come up with is that when taken together, these two key concepts suggest that after 1765, there were essentially four things that caused the colonists to increasingly conclude that they had a right to use their weapons to try to forcibly overthrow British rule of the colonies and to replace that rule with a government of the colonists' own choosing. And what were these four things? Well, 1, the Enlightenment. 2, the colonists' religious views. 3, Thomas Paine's common sense. And 4, Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. Now, of these four things, the two that are most important, if only because they are most likely to appear on the May exam, are Thomas Paine's common sense and Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. So given that reality, let's now take a close look at both common sense and the Declaration, starting with Paine's common sense. Thomas Paine's common sense was, in a single sentence, a small booklet that in a persuasive and impassioned manner advocated for independence from Great Britain long before anyone else had given serious thought to the call for independence. But why did Paine think that the colonists were entitled to their independence? And what did he think would happen to the colonists if they were to demand their independence? Well, the answer to these two questions, you'll need to take a close look at some excerpts from Common Sense, with these excerpts appearing on the next 4 slides. Slide number 1, slide number 2, slide number 3, and slide number 4. Now, I know that went way too fast for you, so please pause the video right now, and when paused, go back over the previous 4 slides, looking for Thomas Paine's common sense answer to the 2 questions appearing on the slide now before you. And now that you're back, did you find the answer to my 2 questions? What you should have come up with for the first question was that Paine thought the King of England was a wretch, a tyrant, and a royal brute, and that in Paine's opinion, it is common sense that when a people are governed by a wretch, tyrant, or royal brute, they have a right to revolt. And as for the question, what did Paine think would happen to the colonists if they were to demand their common sense right to independence, I so hope you were able to say that in Paine's opinion, he thought the colonists, as free and independent states, would flourish. So with that said, it's now time to close out on Paine's common sense and move on to Jefferson's Declaration. But first I want to suggest that you reinforce whatever you learned in my video about common sense by watching another short video on the subject. The Reading Through History video, for example, that is featured here, with this suggestion made only because Paine's common sense is so likely to appear on the May exam, and because I think that a great way for you to learn about an all-important subject is for you to hear about that subject from as many different teachers as possible. Now to Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. In a single sentence, the Declaration is an Enlightenment-era inspired written statement that announced that the 13 colonies, at that time already at war with Great Britain, would from July 14, 1776 onward regard themselves as no longer under British rule. But why did Jefferson, in the Declaration, think that the colonists had the right to demand their independence? That's the question we now need to address, and to do that, we just need to take a look at the language of the Declaration itself, starting with the first paragraph. See the highlighted text found there, and the reference to something called the laws of nature? And how about the highlighted text found here and the reference to certain unalienable rights? Now, surely you can name 3 of the natural, aka unalienable rights, that the Declaration says we all possess. But if not, pause the video now, and when paused, take a close look at the first paragraph. All 3 rights can be found there. Then recognize that the Declaration says that we not only have these 3 natural rights, but we also have 3 more. With these 3 rights given to us if when the government doesn't secure the people's first 3 mentioned natural rights. And what are these 3 additional natural rights? Do you know? If not, pause the video and take a close look at the second paragraph of this key portion of the Declaration. Do you now, by chance, see where I'm going with this? If not, let me be real clear. Thomas Jefferson's Declaration argues that the King of England failed to secure the colonists' natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And because the king failed to secure these rights for the colonists, argued Jefferson, had the right to alter and abolish the British government and replace it with a government of their own. In other words, Jefferson's Declaration, along with Thomas Paine's common sense, go a long, long way to explaining how and why colonial attitudes about government and the individual changed in the years leading up to the American Revolution. And with that said, the topic 3.4 learning objective has been fully addressed, fully explored, though that doesn't mean I'm done talking. In fact, before closing out today's video, there's just one more thing that I want to do, and that is to describe for you a super interesting story relating to topic 3.4. The only problem, there are so many good ones to choose from. Nonetheless, the one I want to share with you now, the one I like to share the most, and I'm going to share with you now in this closeout, is the story relating to one of my juniors who last year in class asked whether Thomas Paine, when writing Common Sense, was serving as nothing more than a mere mouthpiece for Ben Franklin. In other words, the student wondered, was Thomas Paine simply someone willing to utter what Ben Franklin wanted to say but dared not? To find out the answer to this question and to model a great way for any student to find the answer to any intriguing historical question, I emailed Gary Burton of the Thomas Paine National Historical Association. And oh my, did Mr. Burton ever come back with an interesting response, with excerpts of that response now appearing on the slide before you. And so with that said, this episode of APUSH Daily now does come to an end. Thank you all for listening. It's been an honor and a privilege. This is Peter Paine signing off.